Before we begin, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the other toast. Your support fuels stories that matter. The cold winter air wrapped around the rooftop of the Argent Hotel in downtown Chicago, but inside the glass ballroom, everything sparkled: gold trim, navy velvet, the glow of $500 champagne flutes. It was the 2023 Winter Gala of Borealis Capital Partners, and the elite of the financial world were packed shoulder to shoulder beneath chandeliers, pretending to like each other. I stood near the edge of the ballroom, staring into my glass. My green silk dress was tailored to perfection. My heels silent on the marble floor. My name was Elena Ruiz, Director of Corporate Risk at Borealis. To most, I was just the Latina girl from Queens who somehow ended up in a room full of Harvard MBAs and offshore tax cheats. To Graham Whitmore, the CEO of Borealis, I was something else entirely, his favorite target. He called me firecracker in board meetings. Commented on my dresses. Told clients I was there to sweeten the pitch deck. But tonight, he was going to learn what fire really feels like. Across the room, my husband, Detective Aaron Ruiz, stood near the bar, disguised in a classic tuxedo, chatting up a senior partner from compliance. He looked relaxed. Casual. But I knew better. He had a concealed earpiece, and he was watching everything. So was the FBI team stationed 2 floors below us. And the surveillance van parked just outside on East Monroe Street. 3 years of planning had led to this night. 3 years of watching Graham manipulate, harass, and destroy the lives of women who walked into this company with dreams and walked out with scars. I pressed the clutch purse in my hand slightly tighter, activating the silent recorder inside. The device was so advanced that not even Borealis top-level counter-surveillance would detect it. Elena, a familiar voice slithered from behind me, warm breath brushing against my shoulder. That dress. Green suits you. You're glowing tonight. I turned, smiling like I didn't want to vomit. Thank you, Mr. Whitmore. He chuckled, fake and polished. Come now. I think we've spent enough late nights together for you to call me Graham. Yes. Late nights where he would lean over my shoulder, brush my hair aside under the guise of reading a spreadsheet, whisper, mentorship, while his hand hovered far too low on my back. Of course. Graham, I replied, eyes wide and innocent. He stepped closer, smelling of $1,000 scotch and ego. I've got something to show you. A little celebration upstairs. The penthouse suite. You've more than earned it. Earned it. He said that to Talia Burns, the intern he cornered in his office last spring. He said it to Priya Menon, the compliance analyst who moved across the country to work here and left 9 months later with no explanation. He said it to me 2 years ago, in the back of a limousine, when I first realized what kind of predator I was dealing with. I blinked slowly. Actually, I was about to check on Aaron. Oh, come on, he said, laughing. You can do better than a +1 husband. Just 5 minutes. I want to show you something. I stepped back. He stepped forward. Right into the zone of failure. Every camera positioned around this ballroom had a direct line of sight. My dress had hidden microphones woven into the lining. The FBI had already greenlit the sting. But for Graham to fall, he had to go too far. He had to escalate in front of witnesses. He reached for my wrist. Then the ballroom doors opened. And that's when the trap snapped shut. 2 men in tuxedos moved toward us swiftly, their posture crisp. From a distance, they looked like party guests. But I knew their names. Agents Lennox and Pritchard. Mr. Whitmore, one of them said, flashing a badge. Step away from Ms. Ruiz. Graham laughed, confused. What the hell is this? Aaron stepped in behind them, flipping his badge. Detective Aaron Ruiz, Chicago SVU. You're under arrest for multiple counts of sexual harassment, coercion, and attempted assault. The music didn't stop. But the entire room did. I could feel 200 heads turn toward us. Some gasped. Some whispered. Some women exhaled like they had waited years for this. What are you talking about? Graham shouted, yanking his arm away. This is a setup. You little witch. You planned this. Yes, I said, stepping close enough that he could see the reflection of himself in my calm eyes. For 3 years. His smile cracked. His voice dropped to a growl. You'll regret this. I don't think so, Aaron replied, slapping a pair of handcuffs around his wrists. You see, we have your voice on tape, your emails, your offshore payments to silence former staff, and 37 sworn statements from women you thought would never speak again. Graham's face contorted. Panic met rage. I looked around the ballroom. And for the first time, I saw something new in people's eyes. Not just shock. Hope. A new chapter had begun. But this wasn't the end. The real storm was just beginning. 3 years earlier, I walked into the lobby of Borealis Capital Partners wearing my best thrift store blazer and clutching a forged resume that listed 2 hedge funds and a Yale MBA I never earned. It was all fiction. Every degree, every reference, every neatly fabricated LinkedIn connection had been handcrafted by the task force. Because in the eyes of men like Graham Whitmore, I couldn't just be smart, I had to be shiny. I was chosen precisely because I looked like the kind of woman he believed he could own. I remembered standing in front of the mirrored elevators, staring at my reflection, reminding myself that the first step in taking down a monster is letting him believe you belong in his kingdom. Graham noticed me on day 2. Risk management, he'd said, reading the words on my badge. Cute. You don't look like a risk to me. I'd smiled. Played dumb. Let him explain his theories about leverage like I hadn't taught forensic accounting to federal agents 5 years earlier. The grooming began quickly. He started inviting me to small project meetings. Then drinks. Then one-on-ones in his corner office. He touched my elbow during conversations. He always made sure the blinds were closed. He called me firecracker during investor calls, told them I had sharpened up the risk decks with a little Latin heat. And the HR department? They laughed with him. Worse, they documented complaints against the women. One woman. Her name was Meredith Yu. Brilliant. Princeton graduate. CFA certified by 22. She tried to push back. I remember walking into the copy room and seeing her trembling after a meeting. He said he'd ruin my visa application, she whispered. If I didn't sign the NDA. 2 weeks later, she transferred to an internal audit role in a basement office, never to be seen in meetings again. I made a note. Meredith. Threatened. Visa leverage. Graham was systematic. He studied weaknesses. Spotted financial insecurities. Family illnesses. Immigration statuses. He built loyalty by pretending to be a mentor. He built fear by ensuring no one could leave cleanly. And behind every closed door, he believed no one would ever record him. He was wrong. Because I recorded everything. Aaron helped me build a covert recording system embedded into everyday office objects. A stapler. A phone case. The company lanyard. Our prototype had one mission: capture the pattern, capture the voice, and never trigger suspicion. And it worked. By the 6-month mark, we had 23 hours of footage showing Graham's behavior, whispers, grazes, veiled threats, and those awful elevator moments where women smiled like survival depended on it. Because it did. But there was a problem. We didn't just need footage, we needed the network. The men behind Graham. The ones in legal, HR, the board, the ones who helped cover it up. And to expose them, I had to get closer. So when Graham invited me to the Borealis Executive Retreat in Aspen, I accepted. 3 nights in a mountain lodge. 5 executives. 2 assistants. Me. And a chance to see exactly how far the rabbit hole went. I'll never forget the first night. We sat around the fire, drinking top-shelf whiskey. Graham had his hand on my knee. The CFO, Richard Bell, looked at it, and turned away. "Don't look so nervous," Graham whispered. "No one's watching." But I was recording. That weekend, I captured footage of board members joking about settlements. Discussing payouts. One even said, "It's cheaper to write a check than fix a culture." By Monday morning, we had enough evidence to get the district attorney's attention. But not enough to prosecute. Not yet. We needed the financial link. The paper trail that proved Borealis used hush money disguised as consultant fees and vendor payments to silence survivors. And that, ironically, came from a young woman in accounts payable. Her name was Camila. And she almost didn't speak to me at all. Until the day Graham cornered her in the parking garage. I arrived just after it happened. Her hands were shaking so badly she dropped her coffee. "I don't want to be next," she whispered. "You're not next," I told her. "You're the one who ends this." The next day, a flash drive appeared on my desk. Password protected. Inside were 18 suspicious vendor invoices. None matched real companies. All routed through a dummy firm called Arlo Consulting, based in the Cayman Islands. And the authorizing signature. Graham Whitmore. That was the moment I knew we could take him down. But to do it, we had to catch him in real time. In a moment where there was no legal gray area. Where intent was undeniable. Where the mask slipped. Which is why we chose the gala. The one night of the year he drank openly. The one night he let his guard down. And the one night his arrogance would become his downfall. But in the weeks leading up to it, things got riskier. Graham started to suspect something. The grooming became more aggressive. The comments more cutting. And when he called me into his office late one Thursday, I thought I'd been exposed. Instead, he smiled. "I've been thinking," he said. "You've proven yourself. Maybe it's time you took on more." I waited. He opened a locked drawer and handed me a red folder. Inside was a dossier. On me. Not the real me. The character I'd built. But what shocked me most wasn't the background check. It was what he said next. "You've got ambition. That's good. But just know this. If you ever cross me, I don't just fire people. I erase them." I smiled. And thanked him. Because now I knew what he'd done to every woman before me. He didn't just harass them. He erased them. Reputation. Resume. References. Gone. Until no one believed them anymore. But he made one fatal mistake. He thought I'd be easy to erase. What he didn't know is that I'd already made myself unforgettable. And the story I was about to unleash would echo across every boardroom in America. Because I wasn't here to play the game. I was here to rewrite the rules. 2 weeks before the gala, I was promoted to interim head of strategic risk. It was Graham's idea, of course. His final play to pull me tighter into his orbit. The title came with a corner office, a salary bump, and access to the financial oversight system, exactly what we'd been aiming for. From my new office on the 32nd floor, I had a view of Lake Michigan and a deeper look into the bones of Borealis. On paper, the firm was thriving. Billion-dollar funds. Repeat investors. Expansion in Southeast Asia. But beneath it, we found rot. Years of misappropriated expenses. Shell contracts with consulting firms that didn't exist. And most importantly, payments labeled HR conflict settlements, authorized directly by Graham and rubber-stamped by board members who claimed not to know. The names began to pile up: Board Chair Alan Mercer, CFO Richard Bell, Legal Counsel June Walters. These weren't just enablers. They were collaborators. Aaron and I called it the Circle. They didn't just protect Graham, they protected the image of Borealis. They preserved his access to capital. They covered his tracks with NDAs, severance packages, private investigators, and if needed, threats. But the more we dug, the more we realized something else. Graham wasn't the only one with secrets. Take Alan Mercer. Chairman for 7 years. A polished man with silver hair and a reputation for philanthropy. But when we pulled travel records tied to company credit cards, we found something strange. 4 trips to Macau. First-class tickets booked under his name, but always accompanied by the same female advisor. Only she didn't exist in company records. Or June Walters, legal counsel. She claimed to be out of the loop. But she was copied on every HR resolution. Her initials were on every NDA. And in one folder, titled Sensitive Risk, we found language that practically screamed cover-up. This individual has been appropriately counseled and resolved their misunderstanding of executive interaction norms. Interaction norms. That's what they called it when a woman reported being groped during an off-site. We started printing documents, creating timelines, mapping the connections on a massive cork board in our apartment. It looked like a scene out of a detective film: string, photos, names, dates. Every line pointed back to Graham. But what really connected everything was a woman we hadn't expected. Her name was Valerie Kim. Head of HR. She had been there for over a decade, always seen but rarely noticed. Calm. Elegant. Loyal to the point of robotic. For months, she had stonewalled our team. Cited policy. Redirected requests. Claimed records were sealed. But after Graham's arrest, everything shifted. She showed up at the command center the next morning. "I want to talk," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. We pulled her into a private room. She didn't sit. She just stood there, clutching a folder. "I have 27 sealed complaints. I kept duplicates. Every time he forced a payout, I created a shadow record. I don't care if it costs me everything. I'm done being afraid." Inside the folder were names. Victims. Dates. Settlements. And something else. Notes. Personal ones. Her handwriting. She'd been documenting her own fear. One line stood out: "If I disappear, tell my sister to check the file under my desk." Valerie had been waiting for this moment longer than we knew. Aaron asked the question first. "Why now?" She didn't hesitate. "Because I saw what he was planning to do to you." And then she handed us something that chilled my blood. A second folder. This one marked Risk Protocol, Ruiz. It was my name. The fake one Graham believed was real. Inside were surveillance photos. Emails. A full report, drafted by the same private security firm Graham used to silence other women. He was planning to discredit me. Frame me for embezzlement. Destroy my reputation. He had even scheduled a board session, 5 days after the gala, to announce my suspension pending investigation. That's when I realized. The gala wasn't just our trap. It had been his too. He had seen something in me, maybe not the whole truth, but enough to consider me dangerous. He just underestimated how far I'd already gone. I looked at Valerie, my voice low. You've done more than enough. But I need one more thing. She knew what I meant. The access code. To the secure drive in legal. The one that housed every settlement, every redacted memo, every wire transfer. That night, I stood alone in the legal records room, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, and scrolled through digital files no one was supposed to see. March 2017. $85,000 to a woman named Larissa Mendez. Memo, Professional Conflict Settlement. July 2019. $120,000 to a woman named Heather Tanaka. Memo, Termination Resolution. But it was one file that stopped me cold. It was labeled, Zoya Grant. I hadn't seen that name in years. She was the reason I left NYPD. A biotech executive who came to us after being assaulted by her CEO. She wanted justice. She never got it. The DA declined charges. The evidence insufficient. 3 weeks later, she vanished. But in this folder, I found her name again. Zoya Grant. Borealis Capital. Settlement, $160,000. Memo, Miscommunication, Internal Mentorship Breach. My heart pounded. Graham hadn't just been a predator at Borealis. He'd been doing this across multiple companies. Using dummy boards. Temporary ownerships. Fast mergers. And Zoya had been one of his first. I called Aaron immediately. This isn't just a corporate harassment case. This is serial abuse. Multi-state. Multi-entity. Then we escalate, he said. We bring in federal. But I wasn't done yet. Because something else sat on the final page of Zoya's file. A private note. Subject may have kept personal copy of recordings. Recommend retrieval or destruction. There was an address. An apartment in Milwaukee. And I realized something. Zoya might not have vanished. She might be hiding. And if she was, she might have the one thing we needed to finish this once and for all. Proof. Real, unedited, raw evidence. The kind that makes juries cry and boardrooms burn. I booked a car that night. And as the city lights blurred behind me, I felt it. The storm wasn't coming. It was already here. Milwaukee greeted me with silence. A gray sky hung low over snow-dusted rooftops, and the wind carried the kind of chill that seeped into bone. It was the kind of city where you could disappear without trying too hard. And that's exactly what Zoya Grant had done. Her last known address was a faded red brick building on the edge of Bayview, tucked between a boarded-up laundromat and a coffee shop that didn't serve coffee past noon. The landlord, a tired woman with a smoker's cough, barely remembered her. She paid cash. Never caused trouble. Left one night, didn't say goodbye. But she hadn't moved far. Because inside that building, apartment 3C still had power. The mailbox still bore her initials. And through a sliver in the blinds, I saw movement. I didn't knock right away. Instead, I sat in my rental car, parked across the street, phone in hand, watching. Waiting. 32 minutes passed before the door opened. A woman stepped out. Hood up, sunglasses on, head down. She looked older than I remembered. Not by age, but by weight. The kind you carry in silence. I got out and followed her from a distance. She walked 2 blocks, turned into a discount grocery store, grabbed a basket, and began shopping like she was calculating every cent. I waited until she was halfway down the cereal aisle before I spoke. Zoya. She froze. Didn't turn. Didn't speak. But her knuckles went white around the cart. You don't know me, I said. But I know what he did. And I think you still have the tapes. Now she turned. Slowly. Her eyes scanned me like a weapon. Elena Ruiz, she said, voice quiet but razor sharp. The one who infiltrated Borealis. I nodded. She studied me. Then laughed. It was a bitter sound. Like rusted metal breaking loose. You're late. Back in her apartment, she poured 2 cups of tea and locked 3 different bolts on the door before sitting across from me at a narrow kitchen table. The room was small. Sparse. The kind of place designed for invisibility. She spoke first. I wasn't going to disappear. I wanted to fight. But then I saw how quickly everything turned. My family. My boss. My lawyer. All of them flipped. And then I got the letter. She slid a folded piece of paper across the table. I recognized the Borealis letterhead before I even opened it. We regret to inform you that your allegations have been deemed inconclusive. Signed by June Walters. Co-signed by Alan Mercer. There was a second page, an NDA, complete with a settlement offer, a non-disparagement clause, and an addendum stating that any breach of confidentiality would result in legal action and career blacklisting. I didn't take the money, Zoya said. But I knew they'd destroy me anyway. So I kept the tapes. Not for court. For survival. I placed my phone on the table. Pressed record. Do you still have them? Zoya didn't answer. She stood up, walked to the far corner of the living room, and pulled a shoebox from beneath a loose floorboard. Inside were 2 USB drives. 3 mini DV tapes. And a notebook filled with dates, names, and handwritten annotations. I've been waiting for someone to ask, she said. And now that Graham's behind bars, I want him to stay there. We spent the next 6 hours cataloging everything. One tape showed Graham and his previous company, Cithrex Biotech, making advances toward Zoya in a conference room. Another showed a phone recording of a meeting with Alan Mercer, instructing her to let this one go or risk a career-ending misunderstanding. It wasn't just harassment. It was conspiracy. Coordinated. Rehearsed. And weaponized against any woman who got too close to the truth. By midnight, I had duplicates of everything. Zoya looked at me. Are you sure this will hold? I didn't lie. No. But it's enough to tip the scale. She nodded. I'm done hiding. I called Aaron and had the files transmitted securely to the federal task force. Within hours, subpoenas were drafted. Arrest warrants prepared. And most importantly, the DA authorized a press briefing. But just as I was preparing to return to Chicago, my phone rang. Valerie. Her voice was shaky. Something's wrong. Legal shredding files. IT's wiping drives. Alan Mercer called an emergency board meeting, without you. My stomach turned. Where's Aaron? Meeting with the FBI. I'm on my way. I drove through the night, the roads slick with ice, headlights carving tunnels through the darkness. Every hour that passed, I imagined evidence being destroyed, leverage slipping through our fingers. When I arrived back at the command center, chaos was already unfolding. 3 of our key witnesses had received threatening letters. 1 had their apartment broken into. And the media. Silent. No leaks. No coverage. Because someone was pulling strings. Hard. Aaron stood at the whiteboard, flanked by 2 FBI agents. They're trying to freeze the fallout, he said. Control the narrative. Bury you before the press conference happens. I looked at him, furious. I'm not burying anything. I opened the drives. loaded the files, and pressed play. A room full of agents listened as Graham's voice spilled from the speakers. The jokes. The threats. The arrogance. Every word was a nail in his coffin. Every timestamp a window into the machine behind him. Then came Alan's voice. Then June's. Then others we hadn't even identified yet. And suddenly the case wasn't just about harassment. It was about obstruction. Corruption. RICO. One of the agents stood, eyes wide. This is bigger than we thought. I nodded. Yeah. And they're running scared. We didn't wait. We pushed the press conference forward. The evidence dump was scheduled for midnight. And I was going to be the face behind it. But as the clock ticked toward 12, I received a message on an encrypted line. One sentence. You're next. There was no name. But I didn't need one. Because I knew exactly who had sent it. And I knew he wasn't done. Not yet. At exactly 12:01 a.m., the first evidence file went live. We didn't use press releases. We didn't call a newsroom. We uploaded everything to a publicly hosted server, mirrored across multiple encrypted platforms, and linked it through whistleblower forums, victim advocacy pages, and one carefully timed tweet from a former federal prosecutor. The reaction was instant. By 12:07, it was trending. By 12:12, every media outlet in the country was scrambling to verify the leak. And by 12:24, the name Graham Whitmore was no longer associated with billion-dollar deals and strategic mergers. It was now tied to sexual coercion, offshore bribery, and the largest cover-up in the financial sector since Enron. I stood in the center of the command room, eyes locked on a screen as the download skyrocketed. Hundreds of thousands of people were now listening to his voice. Watching the grainy footage. Reading the internal memos. Every victim who had once been silenced, reduced to footnotes and threats, was now the headline. But the moment wasn't without danger. The higher we rose, the more vicious the pushback became. At 12:45, our mirrored servers were hit by a coordinated DDoS attack. Someone was trying to take the files offline before the mainstream press could anchor them. By 1:02, one of our lead agents, Special Investigator Barnes, received a call from a judge who had always been sympathetic to white-collar crime defendants. "Do you realize what you've done?" he barked. "This evidence was obtained illegally. You're risking the integrity of every prosecution tied to it." But it wasn't illegal. Not anymore. Zoya's testimony had changed everything. And the digital trail left behind by the board's own IT department only confirmed the authenticity of the documents. By dawn, we had survived the cyber attacks. The files were still up. And America was wide awake. Morning talk shows abandoned their usual programming. Graham's face appeared on every screen. Anchors read excerpts from the leaked audio, his sickening laughter, the quiet, cold threats, the language he used to manipulate, dismantle, and discard women. And then came the headlines. CEO of Borealis caught in multi-year sexual coercion scheme. 37 women. 10 executives. One massive cover-up. The fall of a financial titan. But the most powerful moment of the day didn't happen on air. It happened in the street. Outside the courthouse. By 8 a.m., more than 60 women stood shoulder to shoulder, some with printed statements, others with nothing but silence and scarred eyes. They weren't all from Borealis. Some had come from other firms. Other cities. Other industries. Each one carried the same truth. They had been hunted by men like Graham. And now, they weren't hiding anymore. I walked out of the federal building into a sea of cameras. Microphones rushed toward me. Flashes exploded like lightning. But it wasn't my voice that mattered. It was Zoya's. She stepped up beside me, held the microphone with steady hands, and spoke with the force of a woman who had survived everything, and still stood. "My name is Zoya Grant," she said. "And I was the first. They tried to erase me. Threaten me. Buy me. Silence me. And for a long time, it worked. But not anymore. We're not going away. And we're not afraid of them." The crowd erupted. Not with applause. With tears. With held breaths. With the weight of a moment that had been building for years. But inside the walls of power, fear was thick. Alan Mercer's office was cleared out before noon. His email auto-reply claimed medical leave. June Walters filed a request for outside counsel. And Richard Bell. He tried to leave the country. Tried. He didn't make it past TSA. The FBI had issued holds on all executive-level passports the moment the files went live. Aaron pulled me aside in the afternoon, away from the chaos. "There's movement we didn't expect," he said. "We tapped Mercer's private line. He's reaching out to the Department of Justice. He wants to flip." "Too late," I replied. But it wasn't. Because what Mercer offered was nuclear. He had saved one thing for himself. A single, unedited video file. Stored on an air-gapped drive. And what it contained went beyond harassment, beyond NDAs, beyond even Zoya's tapes. It showed Graham sitting in a private meeting with federal regulators. Discussing payoffs. Not hush money. Bribes. To kill audits. To bury investigations into shell companies funneling millions offshore. Suddenly, it wasn't just a harassment case. It was a federal conspiracy. RICO. Money laundering. Wire fraud. Obstruction of justice. And Mercer wanted immunity. The DA's office was split. Some wanted to grant it, to use Mercer to bring down every connected player in the ecosystem. Others wanted blood. A full prosecution. No deals. No escape hatches. The room divided. And I watched. Because while they argued, I realized something. This was the point of no return. If we gave Mercer immunity, we'd lose one of the architects. But if we didn't, we might lose the trail leading further. Because Graham wasn't the only Graham. He wasn't the only predator in a suit. He was just the one who got caught. And the truth was still deeper. Wider. Worse. Aaron leaned in. "You've done more than enough," he said. "You can walk away now." But I couldn't. Not yet. Because in the files we released, one name kept coming up. Not in headlines. Not in interviews. But in footnotes. A name attached to multiple wire transfers. A name signed on off-the-books bonuses. A name that didn't belong to any public executive. Sebastian Kroll. He wasn't on the board. He wasn't listed as a partner. But his signature was everywhere. And no one knew who he was. Yet. I opened a folder on my encrypted drive. Scrolled to the bottom. And clicked on the image marked SK. The man in the photo was older. Distinguished. Wearing a quiet suit in a quiet office. With a quiet smile. But his eyes told another story. He was the one behind the curtain. The one who built the machine Graham operated. And suddenly, I understood. This wasn't the end. This was barely the middle. The photograph of Sebastian Kroll didn't match any face in the Borealis employee registry. No ID badge, no LinkedIn, no company bio. He was a ghost with a paper trail, and somehow, he was everywhere. His signature authorized discretionary fund transfers in departments that shouldn't have reported to him. His name appeared on internal memos that predated Graham's tenure by years. And in one confidential file buried deep in the 2016 archives, Sebastian Kroll was listed not as an executive, but as a strategic consultant. Independent. Untouchable. The more I pulled, the more the illusion of Borealis as a company shattered. It wasn't just a hedge fund. It was a shell operation, an outer ring that concealed an inner machine. And Kroll. He built the inner machine. I turned to Aaron, flipping through printed files spread across the conference table. He's been here since the beginning, I said. Before Graham. Before Alan. Before any of them. Aaron nodded, already scanning Kroll's financial footprint. He's clean on the surface. Everything tucked behind LLCs, trusts, off-books holding firms. But he's left fingerprints. We just have to know where to press. And we found one. A tiny nonprofit in New York. The Levin Foundation. On paper, it supported financial literacy initiatives for underserved youth. In reality, it received six-figure monthly donations from Borealis discretionary funds. None of it made it to students. Because the Levin Foundation didn't exist. But the address did. We flew to New York that night. When we arrived at the address, a brownstone in Tribeca, we expected a locked door or an empty office. What we found instead was a man waiting. Suit pressed. Tie straight. Eyes calm. Ms. Ruiz, he said before I could speak. Detective Ruiz. Please, come in. Sebastian Kroll. In the flesh. He led us into a quiet room, walls lined with books, floor covered in thick rugs. There was no desk. Just a low table. A tea set. And two leather chairs already pulled out for us. Why are you here? I asked bluntly. He smiled, folding his hands. To watch the fire burn. Aaron narrowed his eyes. You think this is a game? No, Kroll replied. I think it's a cycle. And you, Ms. Ruiz, have become its catalyst. He poured tea without asking. Everything about him was deliberate. Smooth. Then he opened a drawer beneath the table and placed a folder on the surface. Inside were printouts of our server logs. The recordings. The whistleblower packages. Even our encrypted communication transcripts. He had seen everything. How? I whispered. He lifted one brow. You're not the only one who builds networks, Ms. Ruiz. I built mine over 30 years. You built yours in 3. I wanted to lunge across the table. But I didn't. Because he hadn't just been watching us. He had let this happen. And they needed to know why. What do you want? Aaron asked. Kroll tilted his head. You're going after Graham. Good. He's a liability. You're exposing Mercer, Walters, Bell. Excellent. They were always weak. My voice was ice. And you? He leaned back. I never touched a single employee. Never signed a single NDA. But I enabled everything. He didn't flinch. Didn't look away. Because I believed it served a purpose. Control. Growth. Influence. A pause. But something changed. You changed it. He pushed another folder across the table. Inside were names. Dozens. From other companies. Other sectors. Patterns. Histories. Dates. Every one of them, another Graham. I'm not giving this to the DOJ, he said. I'm giving it to you. Why me? Because the DOJ will leak. The press will get bored. Politicians will spin it. But you? He smiled. You're angry enough to finish it. I stared at him. He wasn't trying to clear his conscience. He was trying to burn the house down before it caved in on him. You think this absolves you? I asked. No, he replied, standing. But it ensures my legacy ends in fire, not silence. He handed me a final document, a notarized confession of financial misappropriation tied to all the shell companies he had constructed. Names. Dates. Routing numbers. If you survive the next week, he said, you'll need this. And then he opened the door. A signal that the meeting was over. I didn't sleep on the flight back. I couldn't. Kroll had confirmed our worst suspicion. Borealis wasn't unique. It was the model. A scalable system designed to launder power, silence dissent, and protect predators with polish and PR. And Kroll. He wasn't a villain. He was an engineer. Aaron sat beside me, reading the second half of the documents. These aren't just hedge funds. This touches tech firms. Hospitals. Private equity. Even government contractors. I closed my eyes. The storm wasn't just ours now. It was spreading. By the time we landed in Chicago, new subpoenas had already been filed. Graham's legal team had gone silent. The board of directors at Borealis had resigned en masse. And every woman who had ever signed an NDA. They were lining up to break them. But the biggest shock came just after noon. When the FBI raided a Borealis storage facility outside the city. Inside were locked filing cabinets. Hard drives. Unshredded documents. And a black duffel bag containing cash, burner phones, and a small white notebook. The notebook had one thing written on the cover. Contingency. Inside. A kill list. Names. Photos. Home addresses. And at the very top, mine. Elena Ruiz. Beside it, asterisk asset turn threat. Neutralize. Asterisk. I handed the notebook to the lead agent. Then I walked outside, took a breath of cold wind, and realized something I had tried to ignore for months. I wasn't just investigating a network. I was now a target of it. And if I wanted to bring it all down, I had to survive it first. The notebook was more than a hit list, it was a blueprint. 43 names, each marked with a code, S, D, or E. Surveil. Discredit. Eliminate. I stared at my name again, marked with all three. The agents took the list seriously. Within hours, the FBI had launched a threat protocol, assigning 2 protective details to my residence and work location. But I knew better than to trust men in suits with walkie-talkies and radios clipped to their belts. Because if this machine had operated undetected for decades, it meant it had allies inside every institution sworn to protect people like me. So I did what I was trained to do. I disappeared. No digital trail. No phone signals. No credit cards. Just a burner device, a duffel bag, and one address memorized in my mind like a prayer, an old safe house used during my SVU days, buried in the woods an hour outside the city, powered by a backup generator and stocked with analog records. Aaron didn't like it, but he understood. He would stay visible. Maintain pressure. Feed the media what they needed to stay loud. But I would vanish until the final blow could be struck. Because there was one more name on the list that no one could explain. It wasn't an executive. Not a lawyer. Not even a victim. It was someone labeled only as MK, asset at risk. And the only clue we had was that the initials matched someone from 3 years ago. Madeline King. She had worked in data architecture at Borealis. Quiet. Brilliant. Barely 30. She'd left suddenly, no reason given, and all contact information scrubbed. But the files Valerie had recovered, the ones HR never meant for anyone to see, listed her as the last employee to access Graham's private server before it was encrypted. And then, just days later, she vanished. The official report said, personal leave. But I saw the entry logs. She never returned. So I made her my next target. Finding her was hard. She'd erased herself. But not completely. A Reddit thread under a throwaway account posted a single line a year ago. Don't trust the firewall. It's built to watch you. That exact phrase had appeared in a training module she'd created months before she vanished. I traced the IP to a university lab in northern Minnesota. And I went there. Not with agents. Not with press. Alone. The lab was empty when I arrived, snow falling outside like ash. But inside, I found her. Madeline. Older. Paranoid. Thinner. Her eyes flickered constantly, always scanning, never still. She didn't scream when she saw me. She just blinked. Are you the one leaking the files? She asked. I nodded. I thought you were dead, she said. Not yet. I sat. Waited. Watched her fidget with a rubber band. They killed a woman in Bangkok, she said finally. She tried to expose the encryption structure. Hit and run. No camera footage. No police follow-up. Who was she? Madeline's voice dropped. Her name was Alina. She worked on the same code I did. Only she figured out what it was really doing. I leaned forward. What was it doing, Madeline? She looked at me, her voice almost a whisper. It wasn't encrypting data. It was replicating it. Creating ghost files. Secret mirrors of every internal document, then forwarding it through a hidden server, directly to a firm in Geneva. I froze. Which firm? She pulled out a flash drive and slid it across the table. You want the truth? It's all here. Names. Servers. Traces. Then she looked at me, and for the first time, her voice was steady. But once you open it, they'll know. She wasn't being paranoid. She was being honest. Opening that flash drive would activate a buried beacon. It would light me up like a flare to anyone still watching the network. But I didn't hesitate. I took it. And I left. That night, in the woods of the safe house, I opened the drive on a standalone machine. The directory tree unfolded like a spider's web. Files from 31 companies. Medical corporations. Real estate conglomerates. A national defense contractor. And every one of them had a shared directory folder labeled CAPEX. Inside, I found the original organizational chart. At the top was a name I'd never heard before. Marius Lorenz. Founder. Architect. Banker. Based in Liechtenstein. A man with no digital footprint. But one document changed everything. A scanned passport application, rejected by Swiss authorities. Photo attached. And I knew that face. I had seen it once. At a fundraiser in Chicago. 5 years ago. He was shaking hands with Graham Whitmore. Standing in the shadows. Not as a guest. As the one who wrote the checks. This wasn't just a network of corrupt executives. This was an international command structure built to trade influence, protect predators, and neutralize threats. And we had only scratched the surface. I called Aaron from the burner. He answered on the first ring. I found the source, I said. I know, he replied. And they found you too. I heard the gunshot before I heard the voice. Outside. Close. Then another. Then silence. Aaron. I shouted. Go now, he yelled through the receiver. They're at the gate. Do not stay. Run. I grabbed the drive. The files. The duffel. And I ran. Into the dark. Through snow. Through trees. Through everything I had built. I didn't look back. Not yet. Because I wasn't finished. Not until the entire system came crashing down. Not until every shadow had a name. And every name had a reckoning. The first attempt didn't come in the form of a bullet. It came as a headline. At 6:17 a.m., a finance gossip blog published a breaking leak titled, Asterisk, is the Borealis whistleblower lying? Asterisk. The article accused me of falsifying credentials, manipulating evidence, and sleeping my way into power. It cited unnamed sources close to the investigation, all anonymous, all fictional. The comments exploded. Bots flooded the post. Within hours, it had been shared over 30,000 times. This wasn't journalism. It was a smear campaign. A targeted character assassination meant to discredit everything we'd built. I stared at the screen, jaw tight, as the article's final paragraph quoted a former Borealis executive claiming I was a disgruntled, low-level staffer with a vendetta. Aaron paced behind me. This is Kroll's machine testing you, he said. They want to see if you'll fold. Or if they need to escalate. They escalated by noon. My apartment was broken into. No valuables taken. Nothing trashed. But a single photograph had been removed from the wall. An old picture of me and Aaron at our wedding, replaced by a printed version of the same photo, but with a red X marked across my face. Message received. I didn't flinch. I turned to the FBI and doubled security. 2 agents were assigned to me around the clock. Unmarked vehicles. Body cams. Access to surveillance drones within city perimeter. But I wasn't afraid for me. I was afraid for the victims. The ones who had finally spoken up. Camila from accounts. Meredith from audit. Zoya, who had gone from ghost to symbol. They were now collateral. Which is why I made the call. At 3 p.m., in a locked federal room downtown, I met with the task force and played the final card Kroll had handed me. His master file. It was bigger than any of us imagined. 1,462 pages. Dozens of companies. Hundreds of settlements. Thousands of victims. A ring of abusers, enablers, silencers, and strategists, funded, protected, and guided by a central playbook. Borealis was just the beta version. Kroll had built a template. A structure. A method for turning powerful men into untouchable ones, and victims into invisible line items. He called it the Shield. And every page detailed how it worked. 1 part legal manipulation. 1 part digital surveillance. And 1 part psychological warfare. He even detailed the media strategy, disinformation pipelines, blog farms, whisper networks. And most chilling of all, he wrote down the kill switch. If anyone within the machine threatened exposure, they were to be erased through reputational ruin, legal compromise, or if necessary, terminal action. We were in the middle of a corporate intelligence operation, one that mirrored black ops tactics, complete with psychological profiles and mapped social circles. The agents went pale. And for the first time in my career, a federal task force looked scared. What do we do? Someone finally asked. I answered. We go louder. That night, I did what no one expected. I went live. Not on a news channel. Not on a federal platform. On my own social media. Phone camera. No script. Just me. I looked into the lens, and I told the world everything. Who I was. What I had found. How deep it went. I named names. Showed documents. Played unedited clips. And I ended with one line. I know they're coming for me. I'm not afraid. But if I disappear, this evidence will live. And the next woman will already be standing where I am. It hit harder than we predicted. Within minutes, my face was on every screen again. But this time, they couldn't spin it. Because it came from me. Raw. Unfiltered. Direct to the people. And the people responded. Whistleblowers from companies we hadn't even investigated yet began flooding our hotline. Activists offered legal aid. Survivors offered support. Independent journalists picked up the story where the paid media had dropped it. The machine was losing control. And Kroll. He vanished. We tried every channel. His office cleared out. His bank accounts frozen. Private plane gone dark after refueling in Reykjavik. No trace. No trail. Only the storm he left behind. But while the world watched the chaos from the outside, we felt it from within. At 2:11 a.m., a gas leak was reported at Zoya's building. It wasn't a leak. It was a trigger device, wired into the stove. But the timer failed. The building was evacuated. No one was hurt. But it was a message. The X on my wedding photo wasn't a bluff. They were trying to clean the board. Erase the pawns. And keep the king hidden. Only now, I realized something even more terrifying. Kroll wasn't the king. He was the architect. The king was still out there. Unknown. Unnamed. But powerful enough to erase a man like Kroll when necessary. And that meant the game was far from over. We needed leverage. A bigger name. A domino so large that when it fell, it would drag the rest down with it. And that's when Aaron found the name. Buried in an encrypted folder, marked only with initials. V.C. It meant nothing at first. Until we cross-referenced it with Kroll's travel logs. His board meetings. His largest donations. And a recurring name emerged. Vincent Carradine. Former senator. Now CEO of Carradine Holdings. A private equity firm with stakes in over 40 companies, including Borealis. And in one audio file. His voice. Clear as day. Saying. Keep her quiet. Or make her disappear. I don't care which. He wasn't just a king. He was a god in this world. And now we had him on tape. The moment we confirmed the voice on the recording, the temperature in the room dropped. Vincent Carradine. Senator turned financier. Publicly charming. Privately brutal. He had chaired federal committees. Given commencement speeches at Ivy League universities. Appeared on magazine covers holding babies with captions like, "America's future is in good hands." And now, his voice was recorded authorizing a hit. Not metaphorically. Literally. Keep her quiet. Or make her disappear. I don't care which. We played it a dozen times. Ran voice recognition software. Compared it to public interviews, confirmation hearings, even leaked voicemail apologies from political scandals he'd survived a decade ago. It matched. 99.7% certainty. And that final decimal wasn't going to save him. Carradine Holdings wasn't just an investor. It was the silent majority stakeholder behind Borealis. Behind Arlo Consulting. Behind Kroll's entire system. It was the arm that extended into pharmaceutical boards, media agencies, even defense contractors. We had found the bloodstream. And now, we had the heart. But that kind of evidence, against a man that powerful, didn't guarantee justice. It guaranteed war. The FBI moved quickly. A sealed indictment was drafted. Surveillance placed on Carradine's properties in New York, Washington, and Geneva. But before any of it could be executed, something happened. A leak. The indictment draft was posted on a private political forum known for its influence in the shadow lobbying world. Within minutes, it was pulled. Deleted. Traces wiped. But the damage had been done. Vincent Carradine knew we were coming. The very next day, his private jet filed a flight plan to Malta. We intercepted it mid-air. Agents boarded the plane on an unscheduled landing in Lisbon. Carradine wasn't on board. His attorney was. With a signed document stating that Carradine had entered a health facility for cognitive evaluation and would not be participating in any legal proceedings. A ghost move. Classic. Deniability, delay, and retreat into the safety of mental health claims, a strategy powerful men had used for decades to evade immediate prosecution. But we weren't looking to prosecute him. Not yet. We were going to expose him. In full. And the plan was already underway. Aaron and I returned to Chicago and locked down a safe media outlet, an independent investigative journalism platform with no corporate sponsors, no parent company, and nothing to lose. We handed them the audio. The documents. The witness statements. And the proof that Carradine's firm funneled funds to the Borealis contingency team, the one that had marked me, Zoya, and even federal prosecutors for surveillance and elimination. The outlet agreed to a joint release. And at precisely 9 p.m. the next night, the story broke. Senator turned CEO linked to targeted kill orders in financial cover-up. Within minutes, the internet ignited. The hashtags were endless. Hashtag Carradine Files. Hashtag Shield Machine. Hashtag Names Not Numbers. Hashtag Justice for Zoya. It wasn't just trending, it was erupting. But with visibility came new threats. My protective detail tripled. Zoya was moved to a federal safe house. Meredith and Camila were placed on secured identities. Because Carradine didn't operate alone. He had loyalists. And we knew they would fight back. But what we didn't expect was who turned on him. Kroll. From the shadows. No longer vanished. He sent a message through a secure line only Aaron and I used for internal SVU debriefs. The screen lit up with 5 words. Now he burns for real. Attached was a file. A full ledger. Dated back 22 years. Campaign contributions. PACs. Foreign transfers. And handwritten notes detailing Carradine's personal payouts to cover up 4 other incidents, 3 of them involving minors. It was damning. It was horrifying. And it was exactly what we needed. The press went nuclear. Editorial boards demanded resignations from every firm that partnered with Carradine Holdings. Wall Street wobbled. Carradine's name was scrubbed from honorary boards, hospital wings, scholarships. But the man himself. Still out of reach. Until the plane landed. For days after the exposé, Carradine's jet was tracked landing at a private airfield in the outskirts of Alberta, Canada. But this time, he wasn't alone. With him was a man named Daniel Rook, former special counsel to multiple defense agencies. A ghost with a briefcase full of contingency plans. But someone tipped us off. An anonymous call from an encrypted line. Female voice. Calm. Precise. He'll be at the Quarries Club. Noon. Off-books meeting. Bring real law. We did. The Canadian government coordinated with Interpol. Carradine was placed under protective scrutiny, a diplomatic phrase meaning he wasn't arrested, but he couldn't move either. He was stuck. And now, we were ready to squeeze. Because with the final pieces of evidence in place, Kroll's documents, Madeleine's server logs, and the direct pipeline from Borealis to Carradine Holdings, we were ready to trigger the clause that no one believed would work. The Civil Recall Clause. A little-known statute embedded into federal private equity law that allowed for emergency board removal and asset seizure in the event of systemic abuse tied to fiduciary malfeasance. It had never been used before. But it had always existed. And now, it was the sword in our hand. The media picked up the story and gave it a name. The clause that will cut the machine. And at its center, me. I didn't want to be the face of this movement. But I had become it. And that meant showing up. So I went live again. Different this time. No fear. No disclaimers. I stared into the lens and said the truth. Power doesn't hide in darkness. It wears suits. It donates to hospitals. It shakes hands with presidents. But it leaves fingerprints. And we found them all. And for the first time, the machine shuddered. Because it had built itself to withstand investigations. But not belief. And now, people believed. Carradine's allies abandoned him. His lawyers withdrew. 2 of his co-founders flipped. And in a boardroom flooded with federal observers, the vote was called. Unanimous. Carradine Holdings was seized. The assets frozen. The machine collapsed. But as I stood in the hallway outside that boardroom, phone still in my hand, watching the last domino fall, a message came in. Untraceable. Black screen. White text. You broke the engine. But not the architects. Below it, a single file. Encrypted. Titled. Air. The file was encrypted with a triple-layer cipher, the kind usually reserved for military intelligence. Aaron and I didn't open it in the field. We drove 5 hours northwest to a secure location used by federal cybercrime units, an unmarked bunker beneath a decommissioned Cold War observatory near Marquette, Michigan. Inside, the air was dry and electric, humming with silent pressure. A team of digital forensics experts stood ready. We handed them the file. No names. No backstory. Just the instruction, open this like your career depends on it. It took 6 hours. The first layer was an old RSA key, easily cracked. The second was a phrase cipher, asterisk, the torch always passes quietly. Asterisk. The third required biometric confirmation. Kroll's voice. Which we happened to have, stitched together from his own confession videos. Once unlocked, the file revealed a name we had never expected. Miles Whitmore. My stomach dropped. The name wasn't a coincidence. Graham's son. Only son. 28 years old. Wharton graduate. Rising partner at a boutique financial firm in Zurich. And now, according to Kroll's file, the true successor to the machine. The heir. While we had been unraveling Carradine, burning Kroll's blueprint, and exposing the predators in expensive suits, Miles had been quietly rebuilding. Not just mimicking the structure, but redesigning it. Smarter. Cleaner. Even more insulated. He wasn't interested in sexual coercion. He wasn't driven by greed or dominance like his father. He was obsessed with control. Psychological. Digital. Behavioral. His operation was rooted in data, acquisition, patterning, prediction. Every social media post, every wearable device metric, every loyalty card swipe, fed into a growing architecture that allowed him to preempt risk. It wasn't harassment anymore. It was anticipation. Silencing people before they became threats. Redirecting careers. Planting ideas. Altering perception. He was building a reality machine. And he was already live in 7 countries. Aaron stared at the screens, stunned. This isn't corruption anymore. This is algorithmic influence. He's weaponizing behavior. And the scariest part. No laws had been broken. Because Miles didn't touch the victims. He never had to. The machine moved them. Erased opportunities. Incepted insecurities. Predicted outcomes and bent them quietly, mathematically, relentlessly. It was Graham's disease, refined into code. The final document in the file was a transcript. An internal meeting recorded without Miles' knowledge. A voice, one of his engineers, asked a simple question. What's the goal? Miles responded calmly. To create a world where whistleblowers don't exist. Because they never get far enough to speak. A chill ran through me. We had killed the first beast. But its child was already thriving. And the world he was shaping wouldn't need NDAs or offshore accounts. It would simply redirect every risk before it materialized. And bury every rebel in a stream of silence and missed chances. No violence. Just absence. I knew what we had to do. We couldn't expose him. He was too abstract. Too clean. We had to infect his machine. Insert noise. Unpredictability. We needed someone he couldn't model. Someone off the grid. Zoya was already marked. Madeline was too fragile. And me. He already had my entire psychological blueprint. Aaron paced the bunker floor, muttering to himself. This guy's not like his father. He won't grab you in an elevator. He'll gaslight the future until no one believes it ever happened. I nodded. We have to go analog. So we did. We pulled old data. College essays. Redacted legal memos. Even poetry drafts from his undergrad thesis. We studied Miles Whitmore like a criminal profiler studies a killer's manifesto. And what we found was obsession. He wrote about control like it was religion. About timelines. Forked paths. The concept of inevitability. He believed in determinism, the idea that if you knew enough, you could predict everything. And if you could predict it, you could control it. I smiled. Because that meant he had a weakness. Chaos. Unpredictable decisions. Illogical moves. Emotion. Empathy. Everything his machine couldn't model. So we built a virus. Not digital. Narrative. A fictional leak. A fabricated whistleblower. An anonymous confessor named Haley Easton, claiming to be a former assistant of Miles Whitmore with recordings, screenshots, and location data showing illegal behavioral manipulation. It was fake. But it was good. We made Haley real, social media accounts, college records, blurry photos, distant relatives. A full life, carefully designed to look flawed, messy, believable. Then we let her leak. Just enough. A whisper on Twitter. A vague post in a forum. A voicemail left on a journalist's burner line. And Miles, bit. We watched it happen in real time. His machine lit up. Redirects triggered. Spoofed accounts deployed. Location obfuscation escalated. He chased her like a threat he hadn't anticipated. And in doing so, He exposed the tools he used to control perception. Suddenly, digital rights activists had patterns. Cyberforensics teams had footprints. And our legal team. They had intent. Because in trying to kill Haley, Miles had proved he could. And that was enough. We moved fast. Filed an emergency motion in federal court. Requested a classified tech review. And demanded a moratorium on Carradine Holdings' digital subsidiary operations. The court granted it. Miles' network froze. His predictive algorithms collapsed. And the machine finally stuttered. But the final blow came from someone I didn't expect. Zoya. She stood at a live press conference, held the fake voicemail from Haley, and said one sentence into every camera. Even if she isn't real, her story is. It echoed. Broke the internet. Because everyone knew, Haley was all of us. The woman who didn't get the call back. Who was passed over. Who got sick and was forgotten. She was the algorithm's perfect victim. But now, she was immortal. We didn't destroy Miles. Not completely. He disappeared into a villa in Montenegro. But his empire fractured. Watched. We made sure of that. And the world. It started asking better questions. The ones we were never supposed to ask. But deep down, I knew. The architects weren't done. And one final file still sat unopened on my desk. Labeled only, the root. The file had no encryption. No password. No biometric gate. Just a single icon on a flash drive labeled in plain Arial font, the root. It was so simple, so unprotected, that the federal digital team assumed it was bait. A virus. A decoy. But I knew better. Because only someone like Kroll would leave the most dangerous secret completely exposed. The most powerful files often hide in plain sight, because no one dares open the obvious. I took a deep breath, double-checked the air-gapped machine, and opened it. The screen flashed once. Then a document appeared. It was titled Operational Genesis, The Origin of CAPEX. The document was old, dated March 3, 1999. A year when the internet was still young and most people still believed privacy existed. It began like a white paper. A mission statement. It outlined an initiative backed by a coalition of private equity firms, insurance conglomerates, and a small group of digital infrastructure pioneers. The project was called CAPEX, a portmanteau of capital exposure. Its stated goal: to develop a behavioral risk framework capable of identifying, containing, and preempting internal threats to investor confidence. In other words, it was never about protecting people. It was about protecting reputation. The first few pages laid out the architecture. Anonymous reporting tools that never reached HR. Private surveillance funded through wellness initiatives. Algorithms designed to monitor language shifts in internal communication. But it was page 16 that made my hands go cold. It was a flowchart titled Threat Escalation, Human Risk Protocol. 3 columns. Column A, Indicators, Missed Work. Complaints filed. Sudden changes in team communication. Column B, Assessment, Evaluate Loyalty. Psychological profiling. Review employment history. Column C, Action, Reassign. Silence. Remove. And beneath all of it was a note, handwritten in faded ink. If anyone ever opens this file, the machine has already failed. You are now the contagion. My breath caught. Because this wasn't just an exposé. It was a confession. Not from Graham. Not from Carradine. But from someone above them all. The original architect. And their name was printed on the final page. Miriam Kessler, founder of Kessler Strategic Capital. One of the first female hedge fund managers in U.S. history. A woman celebrated for breaking glass ceilings, championing women's leadership, and funding survivor-led foundations. A hero. A mentor. And now, the confirmed source of the virus that had quietly infected corporate culture for over 2 decades. My chest tightened. Because I had idolized her. Quoted her. Used her story to inspire victims who needed to see someone rise from the ashes. But behind the scenes, she had engineered the system to prevent those very ashes from ever speaking again. And that meant the system wasn't just built by men like Graham. It was sustained by people like Miriam, respected, untouchable, draped in progress while designing silence. I showed the file to Aaron. His face was unreadable. She's a public philanthropist, he said. If we go after her, this becomes something else. Something global. I nodded. It already is. The next move had to be precise. Not explosive. Surgical. We reached out to a quiet contact, someone we hadn't used since the early days of the Borealis sting. A retired intelligence analyst named Dev Patel who now worked in ethical oversight for a global NGO. He reviewed the file. And confirmed our fears. This isn't just a protocol, he said. This became the model for behavioral influence used in 5 countries' labor departments. We needed to go public. But not through media. Not through courts. Through the people. We built a microsite. A living archive. Titled The Root Ledger. It listed every tactic. Every stage of control. Every name redacted in early CAPEX documents, now linked to public firms, political committees, and nonprofit boards. And then we added the final tile. Miriam Kessler. With a single quote beneath her name, pulled directly from her own TED Talk. Asterisk, power is not taken. It is given. And sometimes, it's protected by silence. Asterisk. The reaction was seismic. The finance world recoiled. Advocacy groups exploded. Whistleblowers from industries we'd never touched before began sending in logs, files, first-hand accounts. We weren't just fighting a system anymore. We were unraveling the blueprint. Miriam didn't deny the documents. Instead, she released a statement claiming they were early academic exercises in workplace optimization, never intended for implementation. But buried in her statement was a single sentence. I regret how far it was allowed to evolve. Allowed. Not designed. Not funded. Allowed. That was her way of admitting she had opened the door. And then pretended to look away while others walked through it. The fallout was immediate. 3 corporate boards dissolved. 2 major PR firms collapsed under internal mutinies. And the Department of Labor announced an independent review of all algorithmic decision-making tools in hiring and promotions. But for me, it was personal. Because the monster I thought I had hunted was one I once believed in. Aaron sat with me that night on the steps outside the courthouse, long after the media vans had packed up. You've changed everything, he said. No, I replied. I just made it impossible to pretend. Because that's what they had counted on all along. The pretending. The speeches. The awards. The smiling survivors standing beside grinning benefactors. But now, the pretending was over. And the silence had been broken. But even then, one final message arrived on my secure line. An email. No sender. No trace. Just one sentence. If you think the root is the end, you've never seen the seed. The message arrived like a whisper from below, not above. If you think the root is the end, you've never seen the seed. I stared at it for hours. Every name we'd exposed had been part of the tree, branches of power, leaves of profit, and roots of silence. But this line implied something deeper. Something older. Something planted long before I ever walked into Borealis. Aaron and I gathered the task force for a midnight session in the war room. Everyone was drained. Some had been living on caffeine and spite for days. But when I read the message aloud, every spine straightened. We began where every truth hides, in the footnotes. We went back to Kroll's files. Miriam's ledgers. Miles's predictive schema. Buried in an appendix of a 2001 CAPEX prototype memo, we found it, a reference to a paper authored in 1986. Sociometric threat forecasting in capital structures. It sounded dry. Bureaucratic. Until we saw the authorship line. Dr. Elias Brand. A name none of us recognized. A name that wasn't in any of the major data leaks. But when we ran a background trace, the hair on my arm stood up. Because Dr. Elias Brand was dead. Officially, he had passed away in a boating accident off the coast of Maine in 1993. But the details were vague. No body recovered. No obituary. Just a closed investigation and a death certificate filed by a private firm. The same firm that would later seed Kessler Strategic Capital's foundational investment. We pulled every paper he had ever written. Academic journals. Conference footnotes. Internal memos. And slowly, a picture emerged. Elias Brand wasn't just a behavioral economist. He was a systems ethicist. A philosopher of control. He had spent the late 70s and early 80s studying how organizations adapt to threat, external and internal. And he'd come to one conclusion. Organizations evolve to preserve themselves, not the people within them. Any system, given time and incentive, will seek to remove its most unpredictable element, the conscience. It hit me like a hammer. CAPEX didn't create the idea of silencing whistleblowers. It simply formalized it. Gave it language. Procedure. Math. But Brand. He had predicted it. Maybe even inspired it. And according to a single footnote in one of his final papers, he had once presented a lecture to a group of venture capitalists in Boston. Guess who sponsored that event? Carradine Holdings. 3 years before the project was named. I leaned back in my chair, heart racing. Kroll was the architect. Miriam was the enabler. Miles was the heir. But Brand. He was the seed. The man who planted the logic. Who theorized the inevitability of systemic silence, and watched it bloom. If he had disappeared in 1993, it wasn't by accident. It was because he saw what was coming. And maybe he didn't want to stop it. A week later, we tracked down his daughter. Samantha Brand. Age 58. Retired anthropologist. Living off-grid in Vermont. She agreed to meet, on one condition. No cameras. No agents. Just truth. I drove 6 hours through the mountains, arriving at a small cabin surrounded by white pines and isolation. She opened the door before I could knock. "You're not who I expected," she said. "I never am." She served tea, then placed a leather-bound book on the table. This was his journal. I've never shared it with anyone. The pages were filled with neat script, diagrams, long thoughts written in ink that hadn't faded. She tapped a paragraph. "This is the one you're looking for." It read. I never meant for them to follow through. It was a thought experiment, what happens when loyalty becomes more valuable than integrity. But I see now, ideas don't care what you intended. They take root. And they grow. I felt a lump in my throat. He knew. Before he died, or vanished, he realized that the theory had become doctrine. The model had become religion. And the machine we fought was merely the latest temple. He left us with this, Samantha said, sliding over a sealed envelope. He told me to only give it to someone who wasn't afraid to burn down their own house if it meant saving others. I opened the envelope. Inside was a letter. One sentence written in his hand. If systems cannot be reformed, they must be reset. And beneath it, a code. A string of numbers. Aaron verified it the next day. It was an access protocol. To a hidden repository on a closed network. Dated 1992. Inside. Early prototype files for the CAPEX system. Original internal emails between brand, early investors, and what appeared to be a covert advisory board made up of 6 powerful names. One of them was a sitting judge. Another was a news executive. Another, a defense contractor. This wasn't a company anymore. This was a legacy network. The seed had sprouted. And now, it stretched into everything. Healthcare. Finance. Media. Law. Even the NGOs that claimed to fight against it. They had taken the same root idea. Predict. Preempt. Protect power, asterisk asterisk. And now. We had their blueprint. But exposing it wouldn't be enough. We had to destroy the trust. The blind faith people had in the logos, the speeches, the PR campaigns. We had to show them how to see it. How to spot the roots hiding under their own feet. So we created something new. A toolkit. Open source. Available to everyone. It let you upload your employment contract, and flag behavioral red lines buried in legalese. It let you scan your company's policy documents for preemptive silencing mechanisms. It allowed you to search public records for firms affiliated with the original 6 investors. We named it Ground Glass. Because once a system is broken, you can't put it back. You can only walk carefully, and warn others where the shards are. We launched it on a Tuesday. Within 72 hours, it had 5 million users. By Sunday, 30 corporations were facing walkouts. By the end of the month, 6 congressional inquiries had begun. But I didn't feel victory. Only the weight of what still lay ahead. Because as we stood in the center of the fire we'd lit, another anonymous message came through. No threats. No codes. Just coordinates. A remote facility in the Nevada desert. A place tied to one of the original 6. And 3 words. Root node active. The coordinates pointed to a location outside Tonopah, Nevada, a sun-bleached stretch of desert far from cities, cameras, or questions. The kind of place used for testing things never meant to be seen. We chartered a military-grade convoy through a federal task force liaison, operating under silent jurisdiction. No press. No badges. Just permission to enter and observe. When we arrived, I understood instantly why it had been hidden. Half buried in the sand was a bunker camouflaged as a mining facility. Faded signs. Broken fences. But the ventilation grates were new. The fiber lines weren't corroded. This place wasn't abandoned. It was active. And when we breached the first door, what we found confirmed our worst fear. This wasn't a server farm. It was a live lab. On the wall was a screen displaying real-time behavioral models, thousands of data points updating by the second. Employee productivity. Stress indicators. Keyword sentiment pulled from private Slack channels. Transaction heat maps. Travel logs. Therapy appointments. Every scrap of human unpredictability, coded, tagged, and scored. A predictive war room. And on the central display. Node 01, Primary Seed Control, Kessler BRD. Not Kessler. Not Brand. Kessler BRD. The final synthesis of their names. A signal that this wasn't just a program, it was a belief system. Kessler wasn't a company or a person. It was the operating philosophy behind how the machine viewed the world. Control wasn't the goal. It was the assumption. Aaron turned to me, face pale. They're not modeling behavior anymore. They're shaping it. We searched the chamber, backed by agents, cybersecurity teams, and federal observers. No personnel. No resistance. Only silent monitors and machines running on automated cycles. But in the back room, we found the power core. A single server block, cooled by liquid nitrogen, labeled Origin Alpha. Its serial numbers were etched by hand. It wasn't just the first node. It was the only one. Everything we'd been fighting, the NDAs, the predictive firings, the whisper campaigns, the buried complaints, it had all been rooted here. Because when Brand wrote about prediction, and Miriam built the systems, and Kroll monetized them, this was the place they anchored it. Here, the seed was planted. And now, we had the means to rip it out. But there was a catch. Destroying the server would erase it permanently. All of it. No backups. No off-site mirrors. No forensic trail. It would be like it never existed. A clean break. But also, no more evidence. No way to prove how deep it ran. No way to hold the remaining players accountable. The agents debated. Some argued to secure it. Study it. Deconstruct it and prosecute from the top down. But I had seen what studying does. I had watched too many weapons become tools of compromise. So I stepped forward. Laid my hand on the edge of the server. And said only 3 words. Pull the core. The team obeyed. The liquid nitrogen hissed. The lights dimmed. And one by one, the screens died. Not with drama. Not with sirens. Just silence. Real silence. For the first time since this began, I felt it. A stillness the machine couldn't measure. Because it was gone. The heartbeat of the system had been severed. We walked out into the desert just as dawn broke across the sky. The sun touched the dust with golden arms. And for a moment, the air felt unfiltered. Like we'd cracked a window on a world that had been sealed for far too long. Back in Washington, hearings were underway. Testimonies from survivors, executives, coders, and co-conspirators. But none of them would ever touch the true core again. Because that core no longer existed. We made sure of that. Zoya went on to write a book. Madeline returned to teaching. Valerie started a foundation, fully funded by a settlement from Borealis' dismantled assets. As for me, I disappeared. Not to run. But to rest. To give the world back to those who would shape it without wires and secrets. Because this was never about vengeance. It was about reclamation. Of truth. Of power. Of voice. But just before I left, a message appeared in my inbox. An encrypted email. Subject line, ashes. The body of the email said. Every system burns eventually. But what grows next, is your responsibility. Attached was a photo. A sapling growing through the cracked floor of the Nevada facility. Green. Defiant. Reaching for the light. And below it, in small text. Kessler is dead. But conscience is viral. I closed the laptop. Breathed in the silence. And let the machine stay buried. Because the story was never about the ones who built it. It was about the ones who dismantled it, piece by piece, and left something human in its place.